All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Wine Women and Words. I am Michelle. With me, of course, is Diana.
Hello.
And this evening, I think last week I got a text from Diana saying, I'm like one chapter in, I'm already ready questions for next week's book. So we are going to dive into The Golden Spoon with author Jessa Maxwell. And thank you so much for coming to hang out with us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, for our listeners who may not yet be familiar with The Golden Spoon, can you give us an overview of what it's about?
Sure. It's The Golden Spoon is like a locked room mystery that takes place at a manor house, that kind of down at its heels manor's house. It's a cooking competition that's hosted by it's a baking competition that's hosted by this woman called Betsy Martin, who is kind of a play on a little bit Martha Stewart, a little bit, of a more old-fashioned kind of character. And she hosts this baking competition. She's been doing it for 10 years. She has a new co-host this year in a man called Archie Morris, who's a more of a like chopped style, brash, handsome kind of man who comes in and tries to like shake things up. And someone ends up dead, and things kind of unravel towards that. So it starts out with someone dying, and then you find out as you're reading who the person is and who the culprits are.
And I absolutely love the book. For me, it was a matter of like there were moments where I was like, oh crap, I've got other stuff I need to do. I don't want to put this book down. And it's
Sacrifices must be made.
I know. It was so hard. But there are so many different elements to the book that makes you want to keep reading it. And me being the writing nerd that I am, I love the way you did you broke up the chapters, especially in the beginning where, and I don't have my book with me to reference, of course, but you've got like there's a bit of time jump where you're like, okay, 1 week and then like 3 weeks prior or something similar to that, and then come back to the present, and then you've got a chapter where it's bread week, and so it's, hey, we're going to be focusing on bread with the characters. Was there a method for you, or what were your thoughts on having to jump the time like that?
Yeah, I mean, so the beginning is like flash forward and you find out that someone has died, and then it goes back. And then I have like a press release, which I did because I used so many characters. There's 8 POVs in it. So I was like, the whole time I was telling someone the other day, my husband's an editor, and I didn't let him read it ahead of time. But the whole time I was like, is this okay? Is this okay to use this many points of view? And so I would like ask him without him having read it. I'd be like, are 8 points of view okay? And he'd be like, I haven't read it. I have no idea. But yeah, so I wanted to make it feel, because it's like a cooking TV show, I had this like idea of it feeling very TV-ish, like feeling very in the moment. And I wanted each character, I don't jump in time really once it gets to the actual competition, but each character, because there are so many characters, I never repeat a time. So it'll be like, one character sees something, and then another character never sees that same thing. So it's like the time always moves forward, which I think kept it from getting confusing, honestly, with that many POVs, and also kept like the story going. And I really enjoyed writing it that way. I wanted it to feel really like immediate and like it was moving forward.
Which the pacing is such an important element when it comes to mystery writing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is my first one, so I was, completely experimenting with it as I went. I felt like the pacing came really naturally because it had this framework of a television show, which I think really helped. Now I'm writing like another book that doesn't have that kind of like contained feel to it. And it's definitely like more, I have to like kind of find my own way, And this was like, it felt very almost prescribed. It was very confusing coming up with the rules for the TV show though, because it's like, I wanted it to be very similar to the British baking show, where people could have that in their imaginations already, but also it couldn't be, and there couldn't be that many characters. And so that was like very confusing to me as I was writing it, like how many characters should there be? Like, how could I show all these points of view without like giving away who was going to be like cast off the show? And like that kind of thing got very confusing to me as I was writing it, but figured it out eventually.
Now, I fully expected Paul Hollywood to show up at some point as a huge, that's like my comfort show when I'm
Yes.
stressed out, is Bake Off, and I don't care how many times I watch it. I know who wins each season. I don't care. I'll still watch it over and over again. But what was there, what was your process of creating all of the bakes? Because I love the way that you described the baking process. And even I was like, ooh, I wonder if I could try that. That sounds simple enough, or not necessarily simple enough, but it sounds pretty straightforward that I might be able to try.
Yeah, I wanted them to be kind of, you remember like in the early days of the Bake Off, it was more like, it wasn't like make a bust of like a famous person in cake. It was like, like make a scone or I liked this
Right.
I love like the early seasons of that show. And I kind of wanted it to be in that vein where it was more simple. So it would be like cakes and pies and things like that, that anyone can kind of know how to make. I'm like,
Not
I
build
love to
like a
bake.
3D structure of your
Yeah,
favorite
I mean, I
landmark.
always feel like, how could those ever taste good, right? Because they're made to like withstand things. I just don't think good food is meant to like withstand like sculpture. I don't know.
Yeah, no, but
I
I
like, yes.
loved, oh gosh, was it Hannah's, uh, was Hannah I forget, it's
The
slipping my
pie.
mind
She
right
was
now.
the
The
pie
pies.
maker.
Yes,
Yeah.
I loved her pie the chapter of her making her pie. I wanted to try that because it sounded
Yeah.
delicious.
I'm not a great pie baker, honestly. I'm much more of a cake baker. But I love like imagining the different flavor combinations. And I was really hoping that people would try to bake some of the things out of the book. But I had in my town that we live in, this on a little island in Rhode Island, and our local bakery surprised me with the blueberry buckle, like a layered blueberry
Oh,
buckle. So that was really special. But no one else has attempted. Like I thought I might see a couple, because I get tagged in so many like Instagram posts. I thought maybe someone would make goat cheese babka or something, but I haven't seen, not yet experienced that. So, but I think there is some good inspiration in there for
oh,
anyone who wants to
absolutely.
Absolutely.
try.
I just don't have the patience to bake right now.
Yeah.
So I was telling Michelle, I was like, I was at Disneyland and I'm so mad at myself because I forgot to buy a pastry to go along with the book.
Yeah.
Like perfect to go with the book.
Yeah, I baked a lot while I was cooking or while I was writing. I like wanted to, bake a lot. And I realize now when I'm writing, I still like to bake. It's like a nice thing to do, like to stop writing and go like bake something. But I felt like I had like a good excuse then.
It's research.
Yeah.
It totally is.
Yeah.
I think that was one of my questions. How much of that baking was your research for the story?
Yeah, I mean, not much, honestly. I mean, I before I wrote this book, I was writing, or I wrote and illustrated a graphic novel. I'm still in the process of illustrating this graphic novel. It's a middle grade graphic novel for Henry Holt. And I listened to a lot of Bake Off, like in the background while I was drawing. So that was like good research for me.
It's the perfect show to have on it's in the background. It's the perfect background show.
It really is.
But I also wanted to talk about the setting, because in a story that doesn't take place in one spot, authors can use a change of scenery or a journey to move along the plot line. Was that a challenge to be static in the same place to get characters from A to B? Or was that kind of freeing in that you didn't have to worry about like how long it takes them to get from A to B, or is this a realistic time frame or anything like that?
I think it made things easier, honestly, in some ways. There was so much happening, and there was so much going on with like the baking competition. So it never felt like the location got stale. Plus, it was like, kind of a gothic, fun thing to explore in my imagination. So I really loved the setting of it. I like to think of it, as very isolated too. And then there are a couple moments where people leave and go to like this diner, which I loved imagining. I'm just realizing now, like I put diners in everything I write. There's always diners. I'm like obsessed with diners, I guess. Yeah, no, I really liked writing it in that place. And in fact, like when I've been trying to write this next book, like, and write other things, I always am kind of trying to go back to that. And I realized I can't, like, that was like a specific thing. And I think it worked out so well for me, like to imagine it that way. And I just loved having the secret passageways and the different things that you can do with like a gothic, fun story like that.
Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about was the point of views, because the last novel that I worked on, it's multiple perspectives. And I was like, oh my God, I hate past Diana for coming up with this idea. You've got 8 points of view in the story. Like I was going to ask because I couldn't keep track of how many points of view there are. So I'm so glad that earlier in the interview you were like, yeah, 8 points of view. So I made sure to write a note for when I got to this question. That's a lot of points of view. Mm-hmm. How were you able to juggle each of those points of views?
I think like, just not overlapping the time definitely helped. I kept the chapters pretty short, and I just made sure that like each person, I really enjoyed thinking of like each person being able to move the plot and the story along. Like I wanted each chapter, I was like, this has to like, I was very strict with myself when I was writing. I was like, you have to make sure like each chapter moves the plot forward. Like you have to move forward in time and the plot has to move forward. So like each time I would go to another perspective, they had to bring something to the arc of the story. And that kind of like simplified it for me in some ways, because my current book has way less POVs. I'm talking about all the time because I'm just writing it now all the time. But it doesn't have that kind of automatic like immediacy that the other book did. I can go more into depth with it, but it's not the same like where it moves, each section moves it forward. And I think having the different points of view kind of simplified it in a weird way, because you couldn't dwell too much on anything. You had to be kind of like compact with but then I liked the idea of like each point of view changing, and then you could like, but each time you had this like very small time with them. But I liked the idea of like trying to make them have like a full character arc too, like to grow and have like to change. Like to me, I always want to see a character. I always hate it in books when characters don't change throughout the whole book, like I feel like that's like the rules. Someone should change, right? Yes. So I like seeing them like kind of like change throughout their limited time, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And I also loved the little moments during the baking where you had the little moments of sabotage where, but it was so subtle that you were like, well, was that a mistake? Or, was that an honest mistake on the baker's part? Or were they just not paying attention? Or was someone really messing with them? When you were sitting down to create those little moments, what was that like, kind of planting those throughout the plot to kind of mess with everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted it to be like that. I wanted it to be where you didn't know for sure. I kind of like things being... I don't know. Like, I think you could be more obvious. I'm like, sometimes I look at it like, oh, I could have been more obvious about it actually. But I liked the idea at the time of it being kind of where you just don't know. I like things being kind of like up in the air and you just don't know, because then you question yourself as a reader also. Yeah, it was fun to think about. I actually didn't know who was doing the sabotaging when I was writing it at the beginning either. So I had to like kind of figure out as I was writing, like who would potentially be interested in, messing things up for people.
I love that. What was that? Now, We won't say who it was because we're
Yeah.
not doing spoilers. But what was that moment like for you during the writing process when you realized who was behind all the sabotage?
It's just always fun, right? When you figure out something, when something clicks into place. I always, when I was writing it, there were so many times when I wasn't sure where it was going. And then when something, all of a sudden you have a brainstorm and it makes sense. It's so much fun to like go in and make the writing better and make it, flow better and make it make sense. It's just so satisfying.
I love those moments when you're like, oh my gosh, and I totally did this. So this
I
will
know,
work.
right? You're like, oh my God, it works. It works.
Now, you mentioned that your husband was an editor, and
Mhm.
you had mentioned that you wouldn't let him read your book.
Mhm.
And I love that you brought that up, because I don't let my husband read my stuff, and he doesn't want to read my stuff because his opinion is that he doesn't want to interfere with my books because he's not my audience. We're very clear on that. And then I always say that I like to paraphrase Toni Morrison, who says, if you want to keep your lovers, don't let them read your work. And so I wanted to talk to you about that relationship with your husband who's the editor, and you didn't let him read the book, and what your take on that is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'd be so strict with it now, but it was like my first novel, and I really didn't know if I could do it, and I didn't know if I would ever be able to finish it. And so I was really scared that if I showed it to him and he had a negative reaction to it, or he even had just strong opinions about it, I wouldn't be able to finish it, like I wouldn't have the confidence to push through and finish it. And I needed to like protect it basically. But he did I was so funny when I showed it to him. I had finished it. I'd shown my mom. She was the only other person I showed it to. And I gave it to him, and then I was so nervous. I had to pee constantly for some reason. Like, I was just like so nervous. I was like, what is going to happen? This is like a make or break moment, my career, our relationship, everything. And he was really, really supportive of it. And it was so great. And he's been such a big champion of mine and of my writing. But yeah, it's so scary showing someone. And I'm not really someone who I don't have groups that I share my work with. Not that I don't want them, but I just haven't found, people to really share work with. And I feel like it's very isolating, writing is always isolating, but some people have more, kind of groups that they share things with, and I just don't do that. So
and yeah, I feel like a lot of that is up to the author as well. And when you were talking about things that came to my mind when it comes to relationships and sharing your work with them is the concept of boundaries. Like, we don't really take that into consideration, that we all have to have our own boundaries with our space. And when your partner becomes your critiquer, that kind of blurs some lines for the author, especially because we notoriously have really soft emotions. We have to sometimes, you have to tread on eggshells with us when you talk to us about critiques and things.
Well, and I couldn't be like, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about, because he is an executive editor at Simon & Schuster. So I can't be like, oh, he doesn't know. I could, if he didn't like it, I couldn't be like, oh,
Screw you, I'm gonna go take my book somewhere else.
He's been an editor so long, and his books have won national book awards, and I just I don't know.
So that's even more of a level.
It's huge pressure. Yeah.
No wonder why
he doesn't really
reading it.
What's that?
I said, no wonder why you had to pee all the time.
Oh my God, terrible. It was terrible. It was really bad. It was really scary. I won't be that
I probably would have left the house for just text me when you're done. I'll go away for a couple days.
Yeah, he read it really fast. He's a really fast reader too, because he reads for a living. So, I would go in and he'd be like, stop hovering.
I feel like I would be an explainer through the process, oh, you're at this part, okay, I did it that way because if you keep going, you'll understand
I think
this character.
I tried doing that a couple of times, and he was like, go away, you have to leave, you have to let me
When my husband finally sat down to read my first book, I tried not to hover. Like I was really conscious of that. I was like, okay, I want to give him his space. Like he didn't read my first book until it came out on the advanced readers copies came out. And then he was like, okay, now I feel like I need to read the book because people keep asking me. And so when he was reading it, like literally he was in the car when I went grocery shopping and he would sit in the car and read it. And I just never, I was like always curious, like when he wasn't around, I go and like try to look to see, okay, where in the book he was, just so that he could have his space without me hovering.
And what was it like when he finished it? Like, how did he talk to you about it?
He loved it. He was like very like proud of it. Like I had talked to him about certain elements of the book because he was in the military and I had, one of my main characters in the military. So I would talk to him about the military aspects of things. And he was, he was very supportive of the book. And he was careful not to give too much criticism. Mind you, my husband's not an editor, so I don't have to worry about it either. But at the same time, he was conscientious of what criticisms he gave, but was really happy that he did read it. And when my second book came out, he didn't make it all the way through the book because royalty fiction is not his thing. And he was like, I liked your other one better because there were like ship battles and all this other stuff happening.
He's like, that's my thing.
Yeah, and he was like, this one, there's just a lot of like political intrigue and a woman swooshing around a castle. That's not my thing. And he tried, and he was like, honey, I can't. I love you, but I can't.
Well, that's fair. Not everyone is going to like every book.
Exactly. And he's not my audience.
And he's not your audience.
He's not my audience.
Now, so the Golden Spoon has been out for about a month and a half-ish. What has the experience been like for you to have it out in the world now and to see it out in the wild?
It's been great. I mean, they sent me on a book tour, which was amazing. And I didn't know, when I sold it, if it would happen, because it seems like it's kind of an old fashioned thing to do almost now. And I loved it. It was really fun. I went to a bunch of different bookstores and different places. I've had a lot of events and it's just been really nice. I mean, I think having a book come out is more stressful than people talk about. It's like, it felt like a lot of pressure, honestly, when it was first coming out. It was kind of scary for me. I didn't know what it would be like. I didn't know what the expectations would be, really. But now, honestly, I feel like any book that I have that comes out, it won't be as kind of stressful or scary, in the future. I was really scared of public speaking when I started this, like when the book first came out, and I'm a lot more comfortable now, which has been like a huge relief for me, because even doing, these kind of things kind of really stressed me out at the very beginning, but I've done so much now that I don't feel that way. And also being like in person was even worse, like being in front of people. I used to have this thing where I would like watch my words like shrivel up in front of me when I was talking. Like I would just like, when you like lose track of your brain, like mouth connection. And I don't have that anymore. So it's this huge like relief. And it's just from having all this experience, because I've done so many events and people have been so nice about the book and excited about it. I think my favorite part of all of it is still writing, though, like still writing books. And it's good for me to remember that, because, that's like what it's all about. And it's easy to forget when you're, going around doing things.
It's a
I feel like
coming back.
I feel like book tours are more effective than like college public speaking classes.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm nodding over here like I know what it's like to publish a book. I don't, but I can completely empathize with feeling anxious about being the center of attention. Like authors, we are in the shadows. That is where where we like to
Yeah.
be, maybe not all of us, but I like being on the sidelines. I don't like being the center of attention.
No, totally.
So I feel like if I ever published a book, that would probably be like, can someone else talk about my book for me?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'll provide speaking points and I'll just hang out on the side.
Yeah. I mean, it's a weird dichotomy because like I'm so appreciative of anyone who is interested in the book and anyone who likes it. And I always want to talk to those people, but yeah, I don't love like having that kind of focused attention on myself is like very uncomfortable. So it's like, it is like the strange like combination. And I think it's wonderful, but also kind of like exhausting, after a while, like, especially not, I love doing like podcasts and things, but like, I think like being in person at events is like very intense and they're great. They're really good. I haven't had a single bad experience. It's all been really, really nice, except Minneapolis. It snowed. There was a snowstorm and we had to like, I took this like Uber that was sliding all around, but people still showed up because people are used to snow in Minneapolis in March.
Yeah, it's public speaking and like putting on that face and talking about the book it's just like you said, it's exhilarating. Oh my gosh, somebody actually likes the words that I put on this dead tree. But at the same time, when you come at the end of it, it's exhausting. Like I find myself just like, okay, I had an event this morning where I had to do public speaking. All right, I'm going to spend my afternoon just doing a lot of
decompressing.
Resting and just like, I'm going to shut the rest of the world out. I don't want to be bothered.
Yeah. I mean, and being like, introverted writer, like, I mean, even if I'm not in the place where I'm like promoting a book, like if I have to like go to the doctor tomorrow, like I will like, it'll like derail me for like the whole day, like, cause I have to go somewhere like, in 8 hours. So I am like that kind of person. I'm like such a.
Well, you need like 4 hours to mentally prepare for it.
Yes,
and then like an hour to get ready.
Yeah.
And so, a 30-minute appointment is like a 12-hour experience.
Totally. I mean, I'm like an anxious person about like timing and getting places. Like I go to the airport like way before I need to. I'm like that kind of person. So I'm just like already primed for like anxiety about things.
And I do that just because I like that like pre-travel feeling of being
I love it.
It's
I love it too. I used to travel so much and I love an airport. I love being in transit. I think it's like such a fun feeling. I like getting my snacks, it's just it's the best.
very fun.
Yeah, flying is for me, it's almost, I mean, depending of course where I'm going, but it's almost just as fun as the place that I'm getting to. Is the getting there.
Oh, that's amazing. You guys think that. I agree. Like I completely agree. I think it's not as fun as it used to be though. It's like a little recently it's gotten crappier, but I've always felt that way too. I used to travel to Asia all the time and I loved those flights because it was such a like world changing thing where you'd fly for so far and then you'd wake up and you'd be like in a, in Taipei like airport and you'd have like that layover. I love that feeling. It's such a fun thing.
Yes, I love, that's one of my favorite parts of traveling is the actual process of traveling somewhere. But it's been many, many years since I've done that. I think it's time. And before we let you go, we do have our all-important Wine, Women, and Words survey.
Okay.
Which is super scientific. But we have noticed between the two of us, so I write fantasy, Diana writes historical fiction. I am 100% a pantser. Like, I don't know what I'm going to write about when I sit down to write. My characters surprise me. We're surprised together. It's exciting. But on the flip side, in like the rest of my world, I have color-coded sticky notes and my planner, and I make my to-do list I'm very organized. Now, on the flip side, Diana is a plotter, 100%, and she does not embrace the pantser lifestyle.
Mm.
But on the flip side, outside of her writing, she is the queen of chaos. So we've started asking other writers where they fall, pantsing versus plotting, and if there was the flip side in their regular lives on chaos versus organization.
That's funny.
So, are you a pantser or a plotter?
I'm right down the middle. Like I'm like a plotter with a pantser wing or something. Like in the
But you
middle.
do have a plot for your books.
I always know where they're going, but I don't always know exactly how I'm going to get there. And I don't write linearly. Do you write linearly? Like, do you write?
Yeah.
You do? Oh yeah, I don't. I'll write whatever I feel like writing. So if I know something's happening later on in the book, I'll write that because I
I
don't
love that.
feel like writing the later, but it does make things chaotic later because when you have a bunch of sections and then suddenly you have to like kind of put them in order, there are, things you have to fill in, that can get a little messy. But I'm very like meticulous about certain things, but I wouldn't say I'm like a plotter in life or in work.
I do like we've had some writers do the same thing where they just write what they want to write that day, or one writer I think wrote backwards. No, that's not right.
No,
that's not right. I'm lying.
I kind of write the beginning and the end and then fill it in like in different sections. Like I write the beginning really long and then I have a lot in the end. I always do this, I think, and then I'll kind of like fill in the middle. And I think that works for me, actually.
I think there's something to be said for writing what you want to write, because if you know, for example, like, oh, 2 chapters from now or 2 scenes from now, this is going to happen and I can't wait for this to happen. The writing leading up to it can feel forced. Maybe it may not read that way, but it could feel that way while you're writing, or it could read that way, or you rush to get to the part you want to write. So definitely something to be said for just writing what you want to write.
I think if you want to write something, you can just write it. I mean, if people have the discipline to write like the full thing from the beginning to the end, like that is amazing to me, honestly, because I cannot imagine doing that. But my whole thing is I have to write 1,000 words a day, like, so that as long as I do that, it doesn't matter where it falls in the document, as long as it's 1,000 words, because then I can see it like building.
And I'm like that too when it comes to drafting. Is 1,000 words is where I'm happy. Sometimes I find myself, depending upon what I'm doing with the book, 500 to 600 words a day, but it's 1,000 words a day is my happy place.
Yeah, because you can really feel it building if you're writing 1,000 words a day. I also think like, I don't know, I think it works out. I feel
like 1,000 words a day is like, it's good to like, it's like a chapter. That's a strong number for a chapter. So you do a chapter a day of the book, and that's one of my things I like to do.
Even if for me it's like can be like 300 words of like 3 different chapters.
Which is totally acceptable. You're at 1,000 words.
Now, when you write the scenes and you have all of them, how do you store them? Do you print them out and like physically put them together, or are they just all in a file?
It's just a hot mess of a document that I like just Frankenstein together eventually. No, I definitely like, they have different, it's like my own, it's kind of like organized in my brain a little bit, I think. But no, I tried when I first started writing with all the different characters. I got like the different sticky notes, all the different colors. I was like, I'm going to do this. And it just didn't work, because then you change something and the whole thing is just moot. So it doesn't, I definitely can't be that organized about it all.
Yeah, everyone has their own method, and none of them is wrong.
No, as long as it gets you writing, that's all that matters.
Well, everyone, the Golden Spoon is now out in the world, of course. So if you would like to order your own copy, please be sure to check out the link to our bookshop on bookshop.org in our show notes. Bookshop.org does support our wonderful writers. It supports the podcast, but most importantly, it supports all the wonderful indie bookstores out there. And Jessa, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us and letting us pick your brain about this book that we've had so much fun reading.
Thank you so much. This is really nice.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.